Memoranda of Understanding between the Government of the Republic of South Africa and the Government of the Republic of Singapore, respectively, on 1, cooperation in the field of information and communications technology, and 2, cooperation in the field of skills development. I have the honor to request Minister Kungubele and Minister Puthatiri to come forward to sign the Memoranda of Understanding on cooperation in the field of information and communications technology. Thank you, Honorable Ministers. You may now return to your seats. I have the honor thank you, Honorable Ministers. You may now return to your seats. We have come to the end of the signing ceremony. I would like to thank His Excellency President Ramaphosa and His Excellency the Prime Minister for witnessing this ceremony. And I now hand over to Mr. Magwenya to facilitate the media briefing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Your Excellency President Ramaphosa, Prime Minister Lee, ladies and gentlemen, we will now commence with a short media briefing. President Ramaphosa will kick us off with his remarks, then followed by Prime Minister Lee. We will then take 2 questions from the visiting media from Singapore, as well as from the local media. Mr. President, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Magwenya. Prime Minister Lee, it's wonderful to have you here, and welcome to South Africa, and we're really delighted that you could accept our invitation to visit South Africa. And you visit South Africa on a very warm winter day in beautiful Cape Town, in the foothills of the of the mountain, and it's wonderful to have you here. Members of your delegation are also welcome, and thank you very much for accompanying the Prime Minister to visit our shores. Prime Minister Lee and I have just concluded really wonderful discussions on a number of issues during his first official visit to South Africa. This is a significant year as we are, as the two countries, celebrating 30 years of diplomatic relations between South Africa and Singapore. It was a pleasure to discuss areas of mutual interest and explore ways in which we are cooperating. And in our discussions, we were able to see the breadth and the depth of the areas that we cooperate in, and this has gone a long way to strengthen the bilateral relations between our two countries. We believe that there is significant potential to further develop our relationship, and particularly the economic partnership that exists between our two countries. This is evident in the business delegation that is accompanying Prime Minister Lee, comprising of representatives of a number of sectors from their business community, including from the ports sector, logistics, healthcare, biomedical, food manufacturing, and engineering. So it is a powerful business delegation. Prime Minister Lee and I will have an opportunity later today to participate in a business roundtable with all these business leaders, together with business leaders from South Africa. Our two countries share a common interest in promoting economic growth, social development, prosperity for the citizens of our two respective countries. It is in this spirit that we have worked together in a number of areas to strengthen our ties. This visit provided South Africa and Singapore an opportunity to discuss areas of cooperation that are also firmly focused on the future. This includes cooperation in the fields of digitization, communication and technology, also in areas such as water and sanitation and skills development, amongst others. We've also agreed to deepen our cooperation on science and innovation, as we see great scope and great opportunities where we can cooperate. This was also an opportunity to express our appreciation to the government of Singapore for their support over a number of years in the training of South African civil servants. We discussed South Africa's application to become a sectoral dialogue partner with the Association of Southeastern Asian Countries, or ASEAN. The global role of the Asian region has been growing over the last 5 decades, creating the 6th largest market in the world. Further deepening the cooperation between South Africa and ASEAN would open up enormous opportunities and markets for South Africa in various fields, such as trade and infrastructure development, technology transfer, education, and science and innovation, as well as in tourism. While we discussed several areas of bilateral cooperation, this visit has also provided an opportunity to discuss regional and international issues that are of common interest and concern. These include developments on the African continent, which we touched on, in particular, how we will bring into operation the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and the potential it offers for both domestic and international investors. We discussed the current instability in international relations and the global economy. We agreed on the need for all countries to work together to develop inclusive, just, and sustainable solutions and many other challenges that countries of the world are facing currently. I had the opportunity to brief Prime Minister Lee on South Africa's position on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I informed him that over the weekend I had the opportunity to represent the views of a number of African leaders with regard to a peace mission that those African leaders have been talking about for quite a number of months and consulting amongst themselves with regard to how Africa can make a contribution to bringing about a solution to the conflict in Ukraine and Russia. And this we have been talking about as African leaders because we concluded that that conflict in that part of the world, much as it does not affect Africa directly in the form of deaths and destruction to infrastructure, it does have an impact on the lives of many Africans. With regard to food security, the prices of fertilizers have gone up, prices of cereals have gone up, and the prices of fuel. A group of African heads of states took the view that Africa does need to put forward an initiative, a peace initiative that could help to contribute to the solution of that conflict. And facilitated by the Brazzaville Foundation, we've been able to have these discussions. Principal to our discussions are efforts to a peaceful resolution to the devastating conflict in Ukraine, its cost on human lives, and the impact on the African continent. And in this regard, representing the various heads of government, I presented the initiative on behalf of these countries: Zambia, Senegal, Congo-Brazzaville, Uganda, Egypt, and South Africa as well. The two leaders that I had occasion to speak to, that is President Putin and President Zelensky, agreed that they would be willing to receive the mission of the African heads of states in both Moscow and Kyiv. I agreed with both of them that we would commence with the preparations for the engagements with these African heads of state. The Secretary General of the United Nations was also briefed, and so is the African Union office also briefed. So we're aiming that with the preparations, broader global community. I'd like to thank Prime Minister Lee for a very productive deliberation and for his commitment to building stronger ties between our two countries. And I thank you for coming over and look forward to the discussions that we are going to have with the business leader later today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, President Ramaphosa. President Ramaphosa, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to everybody. I thank the President for inviting me to visit South Africa and for his very warm hospitality. President Ramaphosa is a good friend to Singapore. He visited in 2016 as Deputy President, and we last met in Bali in November on the sidelines of the G20 summit. And I'm very happy finally to have a chance to visit this beautiful country and reconnect with the President. When he visited Singapore in 2016, the President said that a brighter day was rising upon Africa, and he invited the people of Singapore to bask in its warmth with South Africa. And indeed, Singapore is happy to be partners in South Africa's growth. South Africa is one of the largest economies on the continent and a G20 member. So we had a good discussion of our bilateral cooperation and within the context of the global situation and the regional opportunities in Asia and in Africa. I thank the President for his briefing on his thoughts on the situation in Ukraine and his plans for a peace mission, together with other African leaders, to Moscow and to Kyiv, in order to pursue or to encourage the parties to engage in ways to de-escalate and work towards a peaceful outcome of the dispute. I explained to the President Singapore's perspective on the war in Ukraine and how we saw it as a matter of fundamental principle that the UN Charter must be upheld, that borders have to be sacrosanct, that one country cannot invade another with impunity, and it cannot be something, when it happens, it cannot be something which is acquiesced in or approved of, but a clear disapproval has to be given, which is why Singapore has taken such a stand on Russia's invasion of Ukraine, to oppose and to condemn it at the United Nations as well as internationally, and taken targeted sanctions against Russia in this objective. It's a stand which is based on principle. It's a stand which we have taken regardless of who the aggressor is, and without meaning that we are hostile to the countries which are participants. We remain friends with Russia, but we cannot approve of what has been done. In the same way as we are friends with America and have been for a very long time. But when America invaded Grenada in the early 1970s, Singapore came out and voted against that at the United Nations and voted to condemn the invasion of Grenada. So it's a principled stand, and one intended to maintain a consistent foreign policy based on principles, and to maintain agency and an independent line by Singapore in international affairs. So I think we have a good understanding of one another, and that's the overall framework within which we are able to pursue our bilateral cooperation. In fact, bilaterally, South Africa is Singapore's most broad-based partner in sub-Saharan Africa. Our partnership is underpinned by strong economic ties. Our bilateral trade has grown by over 60% since 2018. We have accumulated over around 13.5 billion South African rand of investments in South Africa, which is nearly $1 billion Singapore dollars. And there are many Singapore companies here across a wide range of industries, including agribusiness, urban solutions, hospitality, manufacturing, ports and logistics, and innovation and technology. I brought with me a business delegation comprising 17 Singapore companies to visit South Africa. They are keen to pursue opportunities and long-term partnerships with their counterparts here, and I look forward to the business roundtable, which the President and I will be holding this afternoon with South African and Singapore companies. Our people-to-people ties are also very important. We have direct flight services between the two countries. We support each other to develop our human capital. Over 1,000 South African officials have participated in capacity-building programs under the Singapore Cooperation Program. And last year, we also launched the Singapore-Africa Partnership, which includes priority placement, customized courses, and postgraduate scholarships in Singapore. We hope our friends in Africa, including in South Africa, will find it relevant and will benefit from it. We can still do much more to strengthen connectivity between our two countries. More flight services, more trade and investment, more digital links, more people-to-people ties. We just signed, as you saw, 2 bilateral cooperation MOUs. The MOU will enhance cooperation between our digital agencies. The Skills Development MOU will deepen our tradition of sharing experiences and best practices in education and in training. This friendship has come a long way. In 1992, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew visited South Africa. The following year, our two countries established diplomatic relations. Later that decade, in 1997, President Mandela visited Singapore. And to commemorate that visit, we dedicated a giant koala tree to the President. Koala tree. The tree still stands tall and strong today, just like our friendship and cooperation continues to grow and strengthen. So I look forward to working with the President and his government to continue advancing our bilateral relationship and the President has accepted my invitation to visit Singapore again, and I look forward to welcoming him to Singapore before too long. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Very interesting.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. We will now open the floor to questions. We have roving mics that will be handed over. We'll start with the with our visitors first. Paul, Geraldine.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Good afternoon, President Ramaphosa. So we know that Singapore and South Africa.
Talking about many things. For example, we talked about trade, promoting new areas of trade, including agricultural business. We talked about cooperation in renewable energy. And we would like to compare notes with one another also on the areas of how we manage our GLCs or SOEs, because these are important parts of the economy. They provide important elements of the infrastructure very often, and they have to run efficiently, sustainably, and commercially viably. And that's always a challenge, and it's something which we would like to learn from one another. That's just a few of the areas which we're working on. There's also research and development, where South Africa has got very advanced capabilities, for example, in medical research, pandemic preparedness, and Singapore is also focused in this area and would like to keep in touch with South Africa closely. Certainly during COVID, we watched South Africa's experience closely. We kept in touch with experts in South Africa. We read carefully the scientific papers which were published in South Africa, and when there were discoveries, for example, when the Omicron variant was discovered in South Africa and published, we learned a lot from what the South African scientists and medical authorities published, and took a lot of comfort and reassurance that this was a team which knew what they were doing and whose words and explanations and reassurances or alarms can be taken very seriously. And we hope to do more there.
Thank you. As an aside, Prime Minister, you will recall that when our scientists discovered or came up with the information on Omicron, despite having really come up with something that would benefit the world, South Africa was punished greatly in terms of getting banned from travel and all that. The areas where we cooperate are just too numerous to really do a disservice by mentioning each one of them. But one of the things that many of us have always been willing to learn from is how Singapore has managed its state-owned enterprises. And as we go through our own restructuring process of state-owned enterprises, we're learning a great deal from a number of countries, but also especially from Singapore. I have always discussed this with the Prime Minister each time we've met, and learning a lot from what he imparts in terms of knowledge and their own experience to me. So great lessons that can be learned from Singapore, and in a number of other areas as well that have to do with the future. For instance, in science and technology, there's a great deal that we can either learn from each other or do together. So Singapore is a really wonderful model country for us, and it's also a comparator where we compare ourselves with how well they are doing and aspire to be as good as Singapore is in a number of areas. For instance, in terms of their state-owned enterprise which manages their ports and logistics, they are possibly one of the very best in the world. So we aspire to be like them. And much as with science and technology and on things like research, we are also as good as many others, and they can learn from us, but we can also learn a great deal in a number of areas. So Singapore is a great partner to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellencies. Paul?
Mr. President, Paul, can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly, Paul.
Paul Becchiotto from Bloomberg. Just after your announcement now, could you give us a few more details, such as who will actually lead this peace mission, if that's been decided, some kind of time frame? And then, of course, if this peace mission succeeds, would that pave the way for President Putin to visit for the BRICS summit, an obvious one? And will Ukraine be allowed to attend the BRICS summit as an observer, the foreign ministers' meetings in June, I believe? Thank you.
This process has been underway for quite a number of months with facilitators who have really been the Brazzaville Foundation and people from a number of other countries visiting a number of capitals. They've been to Washington to discuss the initiative, to London, and to a number of capitals in Europe to discuss the initiative. And there's been cautious support to this type of initiative. As a group of African leaders, we felt that it is important for Africa, as it is also suffering a great deal on a continental basis, to come forward with an initiative. And I speak on behalf of those countries that I have mentioned. So in the end, it is the African heads of states that I mentioned who will really be leading this process. It's not really South Africa, it's collectively the various President Sassou Nguesso, President Museveni, President Hichilema, President Sisi, myself, and Macky Sall of Senegal. So the 6 named heads of state are the ones who are sponsoring this whole initiative. So we're hoping that we will have intensive discussions with the 2 leaders, the 2 heads of state, and they have said that yes, they are open to having these discussions with us. As to what these discussions will lead to, we will see as the discussions get underway. So it's very difficult to predict in the end what the real outcome will be and how the full ramifications will be about BRICS and all that. So I would like to say let's allow this process to get underway. It's been discussed quite broadly. And now that it's reached a stage where the 2 leaders, President Putin and Zelensky, have agreed that this mission should be received, we felt that we should now proceed. What is the time frame? As soon as possible. The preparations are underway, and people are going to be paving the way and making the full preparations both in Moscow and in Kyiv so that these discussions can get underway.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next question, Yen.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister, President Ramaphosa. My name is Yen Liang from the Straits Times. PM, you've mentioned you want greater trade and investment links between Singapore and South Africa, and of course you've brought a business delegation here. I want to know what is your pitch to Singapore firms to come to South Africa, as well as your pitch to South African firms to go to Singapore and the region. Thank you.
Well, the second half is the message which we have been delivering to people from companies from many parts of the world, which is that Asia is developing, it's vibrant, it's a troubled world, but within Asia, the economies are still growing, will continue to grow, and are developing ties with one another. Certainly, that's the case in Southeast Asia, amongst the ASEAN countries, and in this kind of a greater environment, Singapore aspires not just to be a prosperous spot, but a node which is connected to the region and a center, a base where people can use us as a hub, people can use us for headquarters, people can use us as a jumping off point, and come to Singapore take the Singapore market. It's not so huge, but from Singapore, you can access the region. And that's my pitch to the companies in Africa, because the opportunities are there, and I think Africa is growing. You would like to go beyond the continent, and East Asia is where a lot of the world's growth is. The pitch to Singapore companies is we are looking for new markets to open. We have traditional markets near ourselves, in our neighborhood, in China, in India, the developed countries. Those will continue to grow and will continue to be important. But in a difficult environment, we also have to find new markets. And in Africa, there are spots of great promise and great vibrancy. There's a lot of energy and talent. There are many opportunities, but you have to identify where they are and go for them. And South Africa is a very important economy in Africa. It's one of the biggest, if not the biggest. It's one of the most advanced in terms of its IT, its financial services, its telecoms infrastructure. It's not a developed economy yet, but it is working to head in that direction, and there are opportunities here. Companies which are here have found niches, and they are able to grow and prosper, and we would like more Singapore companies to come and explore and get to know the terrain. Even if you don't move straight away, be aware of what is possible here, so that we do not allow good opportunities to pass us by because we haven't been paying attention.
In many ways, South Africa is positioned almost similarly to Singapore, because we see ourselves as the gateway into Africa. We're the most industrialized country on the African continent, with a number of positive attributes, like a well-developed financial services sector, a manufacturing sector, and with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, we do believe that there's a great deal that is on offer for countries and companies in the Asian part of the world, and we therefore, from a value proposition point of view, there's a great deal we have to offer. But at the same time, we also, as a country, offer a great platform for even South African companies, with our relationships with countries like Singapore, to go into the Asian ASEAN market, as we now want to also find some space there, because there are great opportunities there as well. So using the South African launchpad, where we want to encourage South African companies, and indeed it could also be African companies, to enter the ASEAN market. South Africa plays a key role in that. So the similarities between Singapore and South Africa are great. Singapore is much more developed, and we are on the footpath of following in the wake of what Singapore has achieved. So that's why we say they are a comparator country, but they are also a sister country that we want to learn a great deal from. Thank you.
The last question, Atsi.
Thank you so much. My name is Atim Tana from Newsroom Africa. Thank you for this opportunity to both leaders. So given the fact that, President, you have mentioned that South Africa would be looking at how to deal with SOEs, taking the model from Singapore. Now let's bring it to the electricity crisis that we're facing in South Africa. Singapore relies on import of natural gas to generate their electricity. Are you going to be taking notes on how to deal with electricity here in South Africa? Are you discussing perhaps how you can bring about a solution? Thank you.
Well, yes, the Prime Minister did outline to me that their energy source is largely fossil fuels, and they are utilizing quite a lot of gas. And our energy source, as you well know, RT, is a mixed energy source. We've got nuclear, we've got fossil fuels as in the form of coal, but we also use some gas. And we're now going big in renewables, such as the sun and the wind, and to a lesser extent hydro, which we get, as you know, from Mozambique. So ours is a mixed architecture, and there's a great deal to learn as well from what Singapore is doing. And they are also going to be facing a future where they have to transition because the world is changing and movement from fossil fuels is accelerating. And we therefore need to move in tandem with all the changes that are taking place. We are now on a path where we have said we do need to be reducing reliance on fossil fuels and upgrading more and more renewables. And the renewables are really opening up new sectors of the economy. It could be hydrogen, fuel cells, it could be the sun, the wind, and hydro. So all that brings about a positive combination that we need to aspire to for the future. So yes, Singapore teaches us a lot, and I hope they also learn a lot from our mixed architecture of energy, much as we are going through our own challenges right now with the energy challenge that we've got with load shedding. But we will get on top of that. We will solve that challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. We've now come to the end of this media briefing, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellencies, you may take leave of us. And thank you very much from the colleagues in the media and ministers. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
It
was not so
Not so
painful
hard.
when we end our lunch. Let's go.